Thank you for watching or listening to the ASB Author Showcase, spotlighting authors from around the world. ASB Author Showcase is produced by Author School of Business, an author-owned organization helping authors to fully understand the business side of being an author. If you would like to be on the show or to be a sponsor of the show, simply email us at authorschool@outlook.com. Your host for today's show is B. Alan Bourgeois. Hey everybody, welcome to the ASB Author Showcase. Today I have with me Mr. Melvin E. Edwards, who's an award-winning author, and I'd like to welcome him to the group. Hi, Melvin.
Hi, thanks a lot for having me on today. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm thrilled that you're back, and you're back because you won another award. So this is your second award with Texas Authors, but you've also won other awards. So let's start at the beginning. Tell us what got you into writing a book.
Okay, well, I've been a writer my whole life, officially from the time I was middle school, but didn't become an official author until 3 years ago during COVID when we were in quarantine. I lived in Maryland at the time. I live in my home state of Texas now. But during the quarantine, I had lots of time and it gave me the opportunity to complete what I had been putting on the back burner for years and years, but finally got it done. Came out in November of 2020, won a couple of awards, and then my most recent book came out just a few months ago.
So there's more to the story than just that. I mean, you started to write your first book, The Eyes of Texans. But I mean, what actually got you going into writing that first book?
Well, it took about 30 years of research, of genealogy research, because there just wasn't a whole lot of information available on my family. So it was a very long and tedious process. And when I decided to start writing about it, it was strictly for the purpose of having something chronicled for my children. It wasn't intended to become a book. But after I got about 5 or 6 pages into it, I thought this might actually be something. So I went back to the beginning and started over again and writing it as with the intention of it becoming a book. And so that's where it came from. And it was the perspective, I thought, from the first person perspective, I wanted it to be not just me telling my children's stories, but my ancestors telling each subsequent generation their own story. So I wanted it to be something that was lived, not just imagined.
Kind of along the lines of roots, giving the stories of each generation and stuff. But yours is slightly different because yours is focused in on Texas. Obviously, there's a reason for that. So why don't you share that?
Well, my family has been in Texas since the Republic of Texas days. So my mother's side of the family, which was the focus of my first book, The Eyes of Texans, they came from Maryland and landed in Texas in 1844. And so the story begins in Texas in 1844. And it was part of that was still the Republic of Texas for another year and a half. My second book starts about the same time, about 1840. So my family has been in Texas for 180 years. And because I was able to document that, and it's extremely difficult, as I mentioned, the information is just so hard to find. It's just, in some cases, it doesn't even exist. Because I was able to document it all, I was able to submit that to the Sons of the Republic of Texas and become one of the first African-American members of that organization, which shows that my family has been in Texas since the Republic of Texas was a country.
That in itself is amazing. And it's great that somebody from the African-American culture has actually been able to show their lineage and the length of time they've been here. And there's a lot of stories to unwrap in that aspect alone. But you keep it, if I'm correct, you keep it more focused on the family and some historical aspects more than the racial aspect. Is that correct?
Well, it's all encompassed in there. It's from the perspective of family stories, because that's how I heard them, as family stories being told down from my mother, who heard it from her mother and grandmother. So the stories are passed down as family stories. But to provide context, I gave a lot of Texas history that was going on during each generation. And obviously, because we're an African-American family, that played a big role in it with slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights up until the modern day. So it's all in there together. And I tried to find a way to not have any one aspect of it dominate too much, but I wanted it to be a cohesive story that had some layers and texture to it.
You said it took about 30 years to do the research and stuff. Out of curiosity, is there enough there for a third book, fourth book?
Probably not, and at least not that length. It would have to be more focused on one or two people or one or two generations, but it wouldn't be the same type of book. I just don't have enough information for another volume. I'm working on another book, but it's completely different.
Okay, we'll touch upon that one later. But let's continue on with this one, because from this you ended up writing your second book, which is I'm gonna make sure I get this name right, so I'm going to say it correctly: The Strength of 1,000 Suns. Now that's a lot of suns, and we're talking about actual physical suns, not the suns that rotate every day. Is it really that many sons that are in your generation, or is it something else?
It's something else. It's a metaphor. What I was originally thinking at the time I came up with the title was the heat of 1,000 suns, and with the sun being the type of sun in the sky. And when I thought, well, let's have a little play on words here and make it sons as in the male offspring. And the first chapter of the book explains the title. And I dedicated the book and focused the book on my father, who's also named Melvin Edwards. And I don't want to give too much away in case anybody ever wants to read it, but the first chapter talks about his very strained relationship with his father and how he swore that he would raise his own children one day in a very different manner. And he knew he needed a lot of strength to do that. And that's when I came up with the metaphor for 1,000 suns, to think about being fortified by many dozens of people.
I'm glad you clarified that, because, like I said, 1,000 suns is a lot of suns. And I know you've got 180 years worth of generations there, but
yeah, my maternal grandfather had a lot of kids, but even he didn't have 1,000 sons. So
I'm glad to hear that. That would be one big family for sure. We're going to dive into a little bit more about the book in just a moment. I want to just finish up with the first one just slightly. You have won at least one award. If I'm correct, you've won about 3 awards. Tell us about those awards.
Okay, with the Eyes of Texans, I won 2 awards. The one with your organization, and I actually can't even remember the name of the other one. It was 3 years ago, and it was an international award, and I placed 3rd in that category for biography and memoir. And then with the Strength of 1,000 Suns, with your organization again, I won 1st place. I won 1st place with Pencraft Awards. And then I got a gold medal award with Literary Titan.
And that's great that you've gained all these awards and accolades and stuff like that, which obviously clearly illustrates how good the book is and stuff. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the ASB Author Showcase with your host, B. Alan Bourgeois.
Each and every one of us has a mission in life. Mine is to help people laugh through the good times and the bad. My name is Charlotte Canyon, and I am an author, a speaker, and a host on Indie Beacon Radio. If you need me to speak at an event or autograph my book, you can contact me at charlotte@charlottecanyon.com. Thank you, and have a blessed day.
Looking to take your writing career to the next level? Look no further than 100+ questions a writer/author should ask. With over 100 questions curated by award-winning author and speaker B. Alan Bourgeois, the founder and CEO of the Authors School of Business, this book is a must-have for any aspiring or established writer. Bourgeois, a seasoned publisher, author advocate, and educator, brings his wealth of experience to the table to help you better understand the publishing world and succeed in your career. Don't miss out on this valuable resource. Get an additional bonus of a 1-month free subscription to the Author School of Business valued at $12.95.
Mary Ann Fairmouth is a career consultant with 30 years experience in the national recruiting world, a multi-award-winning author in multi-genres, and a speaker that gives presentations to help you succeed. Her book, Revolutionary Recruiting, made the top 20 global list of recruiting books. Find her on Amazon, your favorite bookstore, or at fairmouth.com. Welcome back to the ASB Author Showcase with your host, B. Alan Bourgeois. Welcome back. This is your host, B. Alan Bourgeois, and you are watching or listening to the ASB Author Showcase, formerly known as the Andy Beacon Show. And today I have with us Melvin E. Edwards, who's won several awards for his 2 books. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail about his second book. Hopefully we won't give away too much. Welcome back, Melvin. Your second book, 1,000 Suns, that, as you were indicating in the last episode, is a metaphor, but it is also about how each generation has to deal with their own crap, but generational crap on top of that. And that's where the main character of this story, Melvin Edwards, which I believe is your father, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so how he dealt with changing generational stuff. So can you give us some of that information without giving away too much? Okay.
Well, my dad and I were very close. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was 13 years old. But before he did, he told me so many stories. It was almost as if he knew he would have a short lifespan and he had to pass along before his time expired. So this story that opens the first chapter, he told me probably when I was too young to hear it. I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And you can imagine it would be pretty, if you read the first chapter, it was pretty dramatic. So for a 6 or 7-year-old, this sort of burned into my memory. And I know how painful it was for him. And I wanted to convey that story in a way that would allow the reader not just to hear the details, but to sort of experience them in their own emotional way. So my dad was not very expressive, but he did tell stories that in a way that would make them memorable. And so I just wanted to pass along as many of those stories as I could and to show, well, number one, how much I admired him as a person. And as I've gotten older, and now I'm actually older than he was when he died, how much I realized the amount of strength it required for him to change the narrative of his family all by himself as a child and carry that into adulthood and then pass it along to me, which allowed me to pass along to my own son.
That aspect of changing the generational aspect of history, of whatever is going on in that family, is something that can be done for anybody. But do you share it within the stories more specifically of how he actually chose to do that and why he chose to do that?
I did. And again, without giving too much away, the situation that created the change was so dramatic and so tragic in a lot of ways that it created an immediate desire to want to change. So it wasn't an incremental, it wasn't, well, I remember this happened when I was a kid, so now that I'm an adult, I want to do something about it. It was something as a kid in that moment. He knew that he never wanted, well, first, he never wanted to experience it again himself, and he never wanted anybody else to experience it. And it's very tempting to give away a little bit more of the story to fill in the pieces here. But just suffice it to say, it was a traumatic event. It actually happened. it was abuse. There's no other way to say it or get around it. And the abusive situation created in him the desire to make sure that nothing like that ever happened again to him, his family of birth, or his future family.
Now, clearly in the first book, it was more of an ancestral aspect, and this one is more of a personal change aspect. So what is it that, first off, what type of reader are you feeling your book is a good call for, something, the type of reader you think would be appropriate for this book?
Well, with the Strength of 1,000 Suns, my first audience was fathers, or men in general. I wanted men to understand the impact they have not only on themselves and their wives and offspring, but on future generations. And because of lessons I learned from my father, I was able to carry that on without a lot of the emotional baggage that he had with him. And so my audience was because of that for men and fathers. But in general, is for anybody who's interested in a human interest story, who's interested in history, civil rights, American history, Texas history, all of those things together. I think anybody who's interested in any part of it, it's, like I said, I try to make it multi-layered. It's not a very long book, but it's got Texas history, it's got genealogy, biography, autobiography, and then some life lessons, especially at the end of the book. So all of the things I put in there, I think created a narrative that can be interesting to just about any reader, male or female.
Now, clearly, because you have multiple layers to this, there's a lot people can walk away from the book and get from it. And of course, the abuse aspect is one of the major aspects. But is there anything else that you hope your readers will get from the story?
Yeah, the one thing I really hope they get is that what you do makes a difference, for good or for bad. It makes a difference in not just your life, but in future generations. And I'm hoping that people will be inspired to examine themselves and to see what kind of legacy they want to leave for their own offspring, their own future descendants. So one thing I really want them to focus on is how to connect in a way that their memory will be a positive one and not just a memory. And I want it to be something that people will look back at and say, I am who I am in a good way, because this person poured in to my life in a way that made me a whole individual and left as few scars as possible.
And you mentioned earlier that you are working on another book. Briefly, tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, this one is a fiction book. I've never written much fiction before. I actually don't even really read fiction. So this is going to be a challenge for me. But it's an idea I've had probably almost 20 years. Even the title of the book I've had for that long. And just after writing these first two books, my confidence has grown. And so I thought, might as well expand a little bit and see how much I can get out of this and develop these stories. And it's a story of, its intent. Hopefully it'll be a story of reflection, dealing with growing up and being a whole person, being an involved person in your community, and having a purpose in life and leaving a legacy. Again, the legacy term will probably come up over and over again, because that's something that's been a part of my life almost my whole life, probably because I lost my parents when I was so young, both of them, that the legacy aspect of living is something that's always been with me. Most teenagers think they're invincible, and I've never had that luxury because I knew how short life could be. So my focus has always been trying to leave something behind that would have a positive impact on not just my family, but on others I come in contact with.
And you mentioned you had the title for some time. What is the title?
The title is Safe in the Suburbs.
Okay.
And the focus is how people sometimes get away to create a bubble for themselves, but they don't really realize the bubble goes with them wherever they go.
And that is very true. We will stop right there, let our sponsors do their thing. We'll be right back.
The garden was still there, full of vegetables and flowers, and a little lone rabbit sat nibbling on a pea plant. Cooney picked, chopped, and cooked some cabbage. Chop, chop, chop. And Coda picked 2 carrots and cut them into pieces. I'm so happy to have a new friend. The end. Wasn't that fun?
Yeah! As an author, it's important to find an organization that can provide the resources and support you need to succeed in the publishing industry. The Authors School of Business, ASB, is a well-respected organization that has been helping authors learn how to market and sell themselves and their books since 2011. Here are a few reasons why you should consider joining ASB instead of another organization. 1. Expertise and experience. 2. Comprehensive education. 3. Customized learning options. 4. Community and networking. 5. Cost-effective and flexible membership options. ASB is an excellent choice for authors who want to succeed in the publishing industry. By joining ASB, you can benefit from the organization's expertise and experience, receive comprehensive education, customize your learning experience, connect with a supportive community, and enjoy flexible and cost-effective membership options.
Welcome back to the ASB Author Showcase with your host, B. Alan Bourgeois. All right, welcome back. This is your host, B. Alan Bourgeois. You are listening or watching the ASB Author Showcase, and we appreciate you being here. We've been talking with Melvin Edwards, who has 2 books, 2 award-winning books. His latest one is called The Strength of a Thousand Suns, and he's explained briefly why that is titled that way. Let's start off with, do you have a website where people can find you?
Well, I don't specifically have a website. I do most of my interactions on Twitter. So I have a pretty large Twitter community, I would call them, of friends. And we talk about books. We talk about my book. We talk about the process of writing. We talk about things that are contained within the book. And when I started, about the time I wrote my first book, I had maybe 500 followers. And then now I've got about 6,000 followers. So that's where people can find the most relevant content, I believe. I'm on Facebook and I've got an author page on Amazon, but most of the daily interaction is on Twitter. And I would recommend people follow me there and join the conversation.
And what is your Twitter ID?
My Twitter ID is Edwards21228. Edwards21228.
And for Facebook and your author's page on Amazon, is that Melvin E. Edwards or
yes,
just Melvin?
Melvin E. Edwards. I always have the E. That's always been to distinguish me from my father.
All righty. And I assume on Twitter then, since you don't have a website, you share with people when you're going to be at events and programs and stuff like that?
I do. Anytime I'm going to be out in public, I try to post it about a month ahead of time, and then each week leading up to it, and then the day before, just to remind them.
And I know you're going to be at the Lone Star Festival in Seguin coming up in May 13th. So we're excited to see you there. Where else are you going to be in the near future?
Well, I don't have anything specifically scheduled right now. I just had an event just a couple of days ago in Fredericksburg. I was at the Becker Vineyards, and that's the 3rd time they've hosted me there, which is, I always think is ironic when they invite me back, because I don't drink wine, but there are other people there who drink wine and read books. So I've got half of that covered. They got the other half covered, and it's been a pretty good collaboration so far.
That's great. Because of the research you did on your first book and the family aspect of your second book, do you have any words of advice for somebody who's wanting to write similar style of books that you have done?
Well, one of the things I learned the hard way, and part of the reason why it took me so long to write either one of the books, and was because even though there just isn't that much information available on the African American experience during slavery in particular, when you're doing the research, anything you find, consider it relevant. For a long time, I thought, well, this isn't significant. It doesn't really fit in with anything else. And then years later, I would find something else and think, oh, I remember I had something else that would have connected these two things together. And then I had to start that part of the research over again. So any information you find, consider it relevant and keep it. And then just consider it a puzzle. So each element of information you find is one of the puzzle pieces, and you're putting together the puzzle to create a picture. So any part of it is important. Don't dismiss any of it.
So it's a good question, because you said puzzle. And so my mind goes immediately to a puzzle. But for a writer, a puzzle is slightly different. So did you use index cards or any type of format where you actually wrote stuff down and spread it out on a table or board or anything of that nature?
I did do some of that, yes. I've had notes that I've kept over the years, and more recent with the smartphone technology, I keep it mostly on my phone, so it's all in one place. But a lot of it is literally on scraps of paper, and some of the paper is yellow because I've been saving it for 30 plus years. And I have a folder that I keep everything in my right here, a little binder here. I keep all the stuff in there, and it sometimes literally look like I'm scrapbooking when I'm writing, because I've got so many little elements all over my desk.
Well, I do hope you consider giving that to some museum at some point, because I'm sure it will be valuable as time progresses and stuff like that. So I hope you do consider donating to a museum at some point.
That's a good idea.
We are at the end of the show. I want to thank you very much for being with us. And I do, of course, want to encourage people to check out his two books, Eyes of Texas, The Eyes of Texans and Thousand Suns. Is there any last parting words you would like to share before we leave?
One thing I would encourage people, a lot of people think they don't have a journalism background, or they're not a professional writer in any kind of way, so they can't really do this type of thing. But what I always tell people is a writer is someone who writes. And if you want to write, just start writing. An editor can fix the mistakes. Every writer has to have an editor. I always say a writer can get you half the way there, an editor will take you the rest of the way. So if you want to write, just do it, and count on an editor to make it look complete and look finished, and that'll take you as far as you need to go.
And you are so right about that. I have no practical experience as an education for being a writer myself, and I am just about ready to finish my 20th book by the end of this year. So I totally agree with you on that. Just sit down and start writing. I want to thank you again, Melvin, for being with us, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching or listening to the ASB Author Showcase, spotlighting authors from around the world. ASB Author Showcase is produced by Author School of Business, an author-owned organization helping authors to fully understand the business side of being an author. If you would like to be on the show or to be a sponsor of the show, simply email us at authorschool@outlook.com. Thank you to Happy Follows for creating the music, Frolic of Words, for the ASB Author Showcase. You can find his music on all major platforms, including